Final Fantasy XVI will go down as one of the greatest entries in the franchise's history, while simultaneously being the most divisive entry in the entire franchise. So to kick things off with this review, let's get the elephant out of the way. Final Fantasy XVI is not a JRPG. It is a cinematic action game, and a fantastic one at that. So to be forewarned with this, if you go into Final Fantasy expecting an RPG with deep RPG mechanics, you are very much going to be disappointed. However, if you go in with an open mind and you go in accepting the fact that this is an action game first and foremost, what you have here is a fantastic action game set in the Final Fantasy universe with a Game of Thrones-like story. All put together, all wrapped up in one package that makes it not only one of the best in the series, but also one of the best games of 2023. Kicking things off with this game, when you fire it up, you will find that there is a glut of accessibility options. Not only does the game give you the option to play the game in story mode, which is easy mode, or action mode, which is the normal mode, you also have these amulets that will be automatically equipped in the story mode, or you can add them separately in the game with the action mode. The amulets themselves, they offer these little bit of buffs to make the game easier to fit your playstyle. Things such as having your dog do their actions on their own, to auto dodging. These things are in place to appeal to a wide range of audience for people who may be really good at action games and some who may not be good in action games. Furthermore, upon completing the game, you do gain access to New Game Plus, which includes the Final Fantasy mode, which is the game's hard mode. So there's a lot of accessibility options when it comes to the game when you're diving in. On top of this, when you play the game, the opening sections of the game, they do a really good job of easing you into the mechanics, as there's mandatory sections of the game where they go over things with the systems and things in place just to give brand new players an idea of how to play the game and what needs to be done. And once you get into the game and you're ready to start going, one of the first things you're going to notice is how amazing this game looks. While the technical aspect of the visuals isn't the best we've seen in modern games, it's the technical side combined with Square Enix's art style, all putting it into a Game of Thrones era-like time frame, and you have a fantastic looking game, especially when it comes to the icons, or should we call them summons. But obviously graphics and art style is not everything in a game if the game has no substance. Thankfully, Final Fantasy XVI does have a great story. It does fall in line with more of Game of Thrones with the mythology, and it does deal with things such as discrimination, racism, slavery, etc., as well as dealing with fate and what fate has in store for you as a person or as a species. Throughout your playthrough, however, one of the things that I think Square Enix nailed out of the park is the thing called active time lore. The active time lore allows you to essentially at any point in time look up the game's lore, and you can look up a little bit of details that go into the story that help expand it. For example, you'll find out that your main protagonist, Clive, his parents are actually cousins, but they don't tell that through the main story, they tell that through the active time lore. Obviously, being a narrative, this game needs voice work, and the one thing I'll give credit is Final Fantasy XVI has the best voice work in the entire franchise's history. The actors who played the characters in this game, they knocked it out of the park, and every time that you have a cutscene, it is immaculately done with the voice work. And when you combine that with the amazing musical score, a musical score that I feel is the best musical score in the history of the industry, put that all together, you have some fantastic cutscenes that really, really help make you feel for the characters and feel for the mood. And whether that is a nice, calm, emotional setting or an action-packed setting, they do a really good job of blending all of these elements to make for some fantastic cutscenes. Here, have a look for yourself.
But mostly I was afraid. Afraid to go back.
I know.
But I'm here now.
As you can see with that scene alone, it is not unthinkable to consider Final Fantasy XVI to be a cinematic action game and not an RPG. So, again, going back to my initial point about the game, this is not an RPG, this is a cinematic action game, and I will get to the RPG mechanics shortly. But obviously, this is a video game, so how does this video game actually play? Well, for starters, the load times in this game, like many other exclusive games on the PlayStation, is fantastic. To go from startup to continue a save file, I believe it took something like 4 seconds. They don't even have a load screen. The screen just goes dark and then poof, away you go. You're in the game. Let's go. Right? Obviously, this is with an action game, so how is the combat in this game? Well, the combat in Final Fantasy XVI resembles that of something like Devil May Cry. As stated earlier, with all the accessibility options turned on and the game being in story mode, you could essentially push one button and one button alone and it will do everything for you. Obviously, for those who want to play that, by all means, I found that to be boring, so I didn't really put those things on. I kept it off. I played it on the normal difficulty, and the game on normal difficulty is not overly difficult. For the most part, it is relatively easy. However, there is some boss battles that will be a challenge for the uninitiated. That being said, with the boss battles themselves, Final Fantasy XVI has some of the best boss battles that I have played in a very long time. You know you're fighting a boss when you have the health bar in the top right corner, and while some boss battles will be more akin to something like Devil May Cry, where you read the enemy attack, dodge the attack, hit them with your own attacks, etc. But the bread and butter of Final Fantasy XVI comes in the form of the icon battles. Most of the time, these icon battles, which they are the summons, happen when it comes to dealing with major bosses within the story that have the story implications. These boss battles can only be described on the same level as the original God of War trilogy. We're talking epic, cinematic, getting your blood pumping kind of boss battles. When you take the icons, the way they're designed, the way they look, when you take the graphics, when you take the gameplay, when you take the musical score that accompanies these boss battles, I mean, you put it all together, wrap it around a fantastic story, and every single icon boss battle is phenomenal. It's to a point where the game keeps giving you better and better boss battles as you keep playing it. You'll sit there and think to yourself, oh, this is amazing. Yeah, well, if that's your third main boss battle, just be forewarned, there's going to be better going along the way. They've done a fantastic job with the boss battles. If you want an example, here's a clip from one of the boss battles. It is a little spoiler, but it's worth checking out to give you an idea of what you're in store. Here, take a look. And that's just a taste of what you can expect when it comes to the boss battles in Final Fantasy XVI. Now, it may seem like I have praised this game, that this game doesn't have any flaws, but on the contrary, Final Fantasy XVI does have some flaws. First and foremost, I talked about it already, the weak RPG mechanics. The stats in this game are meaningless, and the reason why they are meaningless is because the entire game has level scaling. So no matter where you go in this game, the characters, the enemies will always be one level beneath you. So therefore, stats don't matter very much. When you go to vendors typically only have one item for upgrade or one item to purchase for upgrade. It is very, very limited, and you could even make the statement that it is weaker on the RPG side than like a game like God of War 2018. So if you're the RPG side of the game is probably the weakest aspect of it, especially if you're an RPG fan. So that is a problem in itself. The other issue I had came in the form of the game's side quests. The side quests are really, really hit or miss. Some of them are really, really good and provide backstory to some of the characters, as well as some of them even give you the upgrades, such as being able to ride chocobos and use them to traverse the world. However, the brunt of the side quests are uninspired and they're just basically side quests. Go here, do that, pick this up, etc. What makes matters worse with the side quests is when it comes to the main story's narrative pacing. While I do love the main story, the narrative pacing will often happen about 3 or 4 times throughout your playthrough, where something will happen and then you have to wait for so-and-so or wait for something else to happen. During this waiting period, you have to then do kind of like a forced side quest where it's just like, go do this, collect this, help so-and-so, etc. And it's basically a mandatory side quest to simulate time has passed so that the next event of the game. This aspect of the game really drags it down, and you really feel like being like, geez, can we get to the good stuff again? Because this is kind of lacking. Lastly, the last issue I had with Final Fantasy XVI was the game's performance mode. The performance mode is not even worth playing in this game, mainly because the cutscenes are locked to 30 FPS, the frame rate dips well below 60 FPS in the open world, and it's just so inconsistent that it's not worth playing. You're better off just going with the graphics mode, where the entirety of the mode is similar to that of like a locked 30 FPS all the way across the board. I would say play the game in graphics mode. Maybe they patch the performance mode down the road and it is the optimal way to play it, but currently it is not. But overall, I love Final Fantasy XVI. I think Final Fantasy XVI is a Game of the Year contender. It is probably number 3 on my list of Final Fantasy entries behind 6 and 7. But overall, I love this game. I highly recommend anybody who's a fan of the franchise, maybe even if you're not a fan of the franchise, to give this game a chance. Just go in with an open mind, knowing that it's an action RPG. I'm giving Final Fantasy XVI a 9 out of 10. This is Veteran Gamer, and I hope to see you guys next time.